What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Imagine being so desperate to escape Putin's Russia that you climb into a flimsy 15-foot rowboat pointed at one of the coldest, stormiest seas on Earth and just start rowing. That was the choice of two young Siberians in October 2022, Sergei Nechayev and Maxim Tyunaut. Their goal was not treasure, adventure or glory, it was just simple survival, escaping partial mobilization which targeted the most vulnerable Russian regions, such as their own, Siberia. So they cross 300 miles of the Bering Sea, ice floats by, bone-chilling winds, endless storms, all to get to Alaska. Why? Because taking their chances and hoping not to drown in that sea was still safer than being drafted into Putin's war and then tossed into Ukrainian meat grinder. That's not exaggeration, that is the reality of what it means to be young, male and Siberian in 21st century Putin's Russia. Here's the kicker. This does not just start in 2022. The exploitation of Siberia and its people has been happening for centuries. Generations after generations, from tsars to commissars to Putin. And one day, the patience of Siberians had to finally come to an end. So today, let's peel back the curtain on this total human life disregard by the Kremlin. How Moscow has treated Siberians as cannon fodder, disposable resources, and faceless pawns. And by the end of this video, you will see why two young men thought that freezing to death at sea was the smartest gamble than living another day under Putin's shadow. Let's start with the obvious. Russia loves to brag about being the biggest country in the world, stretching across 11 time zones and 1/8 of the planet's landmass. Impressive, right? Well, except that size did not come from building bridges, cultures or opportunity. It came from conquest, exploitation and a little trick that Moscow learned from its old tormentors, the Mongols. So sit back guys and relax, and because in the 13th century, and now I feel like Putin going all the way back to history when trying to answer a simple question. But anyways, back in the 13th century when Genghis Khan Golden's horde stormed through Russian cities and villages, they taught Russia a brutal lesson. Power is maintained not by fairness, but by fear. Entire populations were slaughtered so survivors would never dare resisting again. Russia absorbed that playbook, and when Moscow grew strong enough to throw out the Mongols, it did not exactly promise to be different. It vowed to copy them, only this time with Russians holding the whip literally against their own. Siberia became the empire's first test playground. Imagine vast forests, endless tundra, rivers flowing with resources, and native tribes expert in survival. To Moscow it was not a land of people, it was a treasure chest waiting to be cracked open. And so they sent their Cossacks eastward, pretending to be protectors while raiding villages and then demanding tribute in furs for the privilege of not being wiped off the map. Siberians became Russia's first tax base in blood and animal pelts. It was robbery dressed up as civilization, and the result? Tsars grew incredibly wealthy. Nicholas II, for example, alone had a fortune estimated of $300 billion in today's money, $50 billion more than Jeff Bezos. Meanwhile, Siberian tribes like the Daur were nearly exterminated, their numbers slashed by more than half in just decades. That is how Russia united its empire, by simply turning Siberia into human and natural resource ATM. A colony they never admitted was a colony. And worst part about it all, this strategy of bleeding Siberia while pretending to save it, well, actually never ended. It only evolved. Let's talk about the next step of this horrible process in our next chapter. Here is where Russia's rulers got clever, or depending on how you see it, more sinister. They did not just conquer Siberia, they intentionally kept it fragmented. Roads were built to Moscow, not to neighboring villages. Maps showed Siberia as one giant Russian landmass to impress foreign powers. But inside the empire, most of Siberia remained unmapped, unexplored, and intentionally disconnected. I mean, isn't this a part of Russia, so why would they do it to their own country? Because a united Siberia could resist. A divided Siberia could only bow its head. If one village did not know in which way to go to reach another settlement, the residents would never meet each other. Once again, there was no roads, no communication, no nothing. And honestly, well, things have not changed much in 500 years. Siberia still does not have expansive road network, and some people still use horses and sleighs to travel from A to B. You can even see it for yourself. Just open Google Maps, zoom in on any place in Siberia and, well, try to find more than just one road that connects settlements big enough to be even put on the map in the first place. So yeah, Moscow did not want to govern these people. It did not care about their languages, their traditions, their futures. It only cared about extracting their wealth and making sure they never joined their forces to fight back. Fast forward to the Soviet Union, well, did things get better? On paper, surprisingly yes. Suddenly Siberian republics were granted official languages, constitutions, even anthems, autonomy, freedom, except, just kidding. Stalin's state did not want furs anymore, it wanted bodies. When World War II erupted, more than 20% of all Siberian natives were drafted straight to the frontline slaughter. Not defending their homeland, not fighting their wars, but fighting for Moscow in a conflict that had nothing to do with them. Most people were so far away from the civilization that they probably did not even know that the entire world war was raging across Europe. That's how bad it was with the communication and everything. Their reindeer herds collapsed under collectivization, their children were ripped from families to be taught Russian, their languages were buried under propaganda. Even the so-called kindness of the Soviets, like, relax people, no more fur tax. This was just a cruel joke, because instead of tribute in pelts, Siberian people paid in tribute in flesh. Man flesh. The message never actually changed. Siberia was not Russia's partner. It was Russia's dumping ground, its expendable workforce and its human shield. And even when the Soviet Union collapsed and for one brief second Siberia saw daylight, the light at the end of the tunnel, independent republics with real autonomy in the 1990s, it was all clawed back by the second Vladimir Putin rose to power. The dream of freedom lasted barely a decade before Moscow slammed the door shut again. Has Putin been treating them differently for a quarter of a century? Well, I guess you already know the answer. But let's still try to answer this question in our next chapter. Enter Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, Russia's latest Tsar in everything but crown. One of his earliest moves was centralization. The Cossack Commission in 2001 stripped the Republic of their autonomy under the guise of balancing power. Translation, Moscow just decides and you obey, no question asked. By 2025, the European Parliament no longer even calls Russia a federation. It is a unitary state. A dictatorship wrapped in the illusion of diversity. And once again, Siberians are paying the highest price. Technology made this even easier, and you would think easier for people, but no, the state wins here once again. Remote villages without reliable internet are drowned in TV propaganda, the only source of truth available. Literally, you can turn on a TV and you will only find like 3-4 channels available, all of them by the Kremlin. Kremlin broadcasters erase history, painting Russia as savior rather than conqueror, promising glory for those who enlist, and then the poverty gap does the rest. In Moscow, for example, the average monthly salary hovers around $800. In parts of Siberia, it's only $50 and a pack of cigarettes if you're lucky, if you're smoking. So when recruiters flash contracts with signing bonuses worth $40,000-$50,000, or the promise of cancelling hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, desperation does the talking. Who would not sign, I mean? Except, so spoiler alert, the contracts are traps. Small print ensures that most soldiers never see the money unless they die. And once you do sign, there is no leaving, once again except in a coffin. And when money no longer lures enough bodies, Russia reverts to its oldest strategy, to recruit by force. Men are literally hunted on the streets, blackmailed into contracts that never expire, shot into transports to Rostov or Crimea without even basic training, then thrown right into the Ukrainian killing fields. The best learning comes from the experience, they say, not in these classrooms. Officers don't even bother pretending. One Siberian draftee recalled his journey. He said that they let us even smoke on the plane because they knew half of us were not coming back alive. That's not a pep talk, that's an execution order. This is not a defense of Russia, it's a recycling system of human beings designed to ensure Moscow's sons can sip wine in St. Petersburg while Siberia's children bleed out in trenches. It is the same imperial logic just dressed in camouflage and lies. Here is the sick irony. Moscow still pretends its conquest of Siberia proves some divine Russia's destiny. That's why Putin talks about Ukraine as a holy war against the corrupting West. It is the same myth recycled from the tsars, that Russians are invincible, chosen, destined for greatness, because conquering sparsely populated Siberia was just too easy centuries ago. Never mind that then Japan humiliated Russia in 1905, Finland, never mind that every real empire Russia has faced has crushed it. The illusion of invincibility persists, and Siberia is the sacrificial altar on which this myth is kept alive. But then the reality collapses. Demographically, Siberia is emptying. Whole villages are losing working-age men. Economically, it's a wasteland of unfulfilled promises. Culturally, it's been reduced to a backdrop of Moscow's propaganda machine. And socially, it's just a powder keg. Resentment building with every coffin shipped back from Ukraine, every child forced to learn Russian instead of their mother tongue, every debt-canceling contract that turns into a scam. Siberians are told to fight for their future, but as the one young man answered the recruiter, "We don't even have a present. What kind of future are you even talking about?" No wonder many Siberians want independence from Russia. They've had enough. They have been paying the tsars of Russia for hundreds of years for the privilege to live as a part of this so-called greatest country in the world. They paid in furs, pelts, precious metals, natural resources, and then people. They paid the biggest price, and they got absolutely nothing in return, except even more devastation and suffering. And so, coming back to the beginning of the video, Sergei Nechayev and Maxim Tinaut, this rowboat across the Bering Sea, was not just two men fleeing. It was a symbol, a reminder that Siberians would rather row into a storm, risk hypothermia, and die in icy waters, rather than live one more day as cannon fodder for Moscow's empire. And that is the legacy Russia does not want you to see, the one written not in parades, but in the quiet despair of its most forgotten people. Because no matter how hard the Kremlin tries to bury their history under propaganda, the truth leaks out eventually, through the words of the soldiers on transport planes, through the memories of tribes stripped of their reindeer and traditions, through the two young men who chose the sea over the war. Russia can draw maps, wave flags, and march soldiers, but the cracks are there, and one day those cracks just might split the empire apart. Well, there you guys, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you're to support our work, there are links down below. Thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell, their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.